Yeah, the messages that really keep me up at night are the fact that a lot of our pension funds and a lot of Canada's economy is tied to oil and gas. And that's a little bit scary considering that for our parents to retire, for our grandparents to continue having subsistence to help them retire and be safe, and not to mention by the time we actually get to retire, a lot of the money is still tied to big oil and gas companies, which is not really ideal because if we want the future that we want in terms of beautiful nature and a good quality of life, we hope that Canada can move away from like its oil dependence, not only from like industry, but also from our pension funds. Um, and I think that a good way to do that is actually trying to get oil and gas companies to transition to greener futures, that is. This is some of the solutions that we have here at Enbridge. So just to clarify, this isn't exclusively me. We have a whole department who are working on a bunch of different solutions. This is a little bit of a background of my educational and career background prior to Enbridge. But for example, some of the things that we're working on here in Enbridge is demand side management, which is the majority of what I do. So demand side management is basically having your utility, this could be your electrical or your natural gas utility, trying to work with different levers to increase to increase energy efficiency and low carbon solutions in your buildings. And I get it. I get it. It probably sounds very weird to you that I'm representing a natural gas utility, and we're actually trying to encourage people to use less natural gas. And the reason, like at the end of the day, with sustainability measures, there's typically a second business case to help out with that. And in this case, first of all, it's mandated by the Ontario Energy Board that we encourage people to responsibly use natural gas. And so what that means is, like a natural gas line would be great, but if you're going to use it, you use it responsibly, and we do that by helping out with energy saving measures. The second opportunity for us is also the fact that infrastructure ages. So it actually can be more affordable to get customers to use less natural gas in certain areas. So that basically it means that we don't have to replace pipelines. And I'm not talking about cross-country pipelines. I'm talking about city-level pipelines from the node to your house. Basically, it's really expensive to dig those up. So sometimes getting people to use less is actually a better business opportunity. So looking at this as well, energy savings energy savings kind of seems like a conversation that happens a million times over. But the thing about energy savings is here in Canada, we still don't do enough. It's still the biggest opportunity, but it's still something we haven't widely adopted to the extent that we would like in comparison to like Europe and especially like other countries around the world. And just to put this in perspective, in the context of Enbridge, when it comes to natural gas savings, for every dollar that you invest in an energy savings project, you're likely to see $2.6 back in return. So the return on investment in terms of these projects is really, really good, especially since it's probably one of the most economical ways that you can get your paybacks for like a low carbon strategy. Diving into this a little bit more, we do retrofits, but some of the strategies we have is a program called Savings by Design, where we know for a fact that when it comes to building brand new buildings, one of the best opportunities you can have is when you have all your experts in the room with you and seeing all the different options in a menu type scenario. So one of the programs that we offer customers is this program called Savings by Design, where we actually pay for design charrettes so that customers can think, oh, okay, well, on a good building envelope, I want to use maybe renewable natural gas. I want to figure out ways to save energy in my building. But Savings by Design gives you an opportunity for all the experts to work together to find layered opportunities to really get you a bigger bang for your buck. Moving on to renewable natural gas, and one thing that this is another project that's really interesting here at Enbridge. So I think that a lot of us are familiar with conventional natural gas. So conventional natural gas is natural gas that you pull from the earth and gets piped over to your house. The renewable natural gas is actually natural gas that, or biogas that can be pulled from either your dumps or from your wastewater treatment facilities. And naturally, these facilities are developing methane as waste products for whatever they're doing. In other scenarios, this methane is just reintroduced into the environment, and knowing that this is a wasted source of natural gas, Enbridge is working on solutions how we can harvest this natural gas and actually use it in your operations. So one of the biggest success stories that we had recently is natural gas that's being emitted from the waste management facilities here in Toronto are actually being harvested, and this natural gas is actually being used to fuel the waste, to fuel some of the garbage trucks here in Toronto. So basically you have a cyclical economy solution where you're not just taking your natural gas, but you're actually using that natural gas to fuel fleets of dump trucks throughout the facility. And also this brings me to the final solution that I thought I would share with you guys, which is really cool. So we have the solution called power to gas, and power to gas is basically when you have, so for power to gas, so you have your electrical grid, so fueling most of your appliances, and then you have your natural gas system. Your natural gas system is basically your cooking and your space heating, at least here in Ontario. Most of the basically the renewables that we have on our electrical grid, being like our wind, our solar, those are in full operation, but sometimes we don't have the demand meeting the output of these renewables. So sometimes you have way too much solar or you have way too much wind at a time that you don't really need it. So Ontario's big opportunity on the energy side is really about storage, and finding how to store this and actually use this at the right time. So what power to gas is power to gas when you have a surplus of electricity from your inconsistent renewables, being your sun, your solar, and your wind. Power to gas basically uses this electrical energy, uses it to fuel an electrolysis process. So that's basically splitting. It's basically splitting water, and then taking the hydrogen out of that water, and then having sorry, yeah. So basically, you're taking a process. You're making hydrogen fuels using the extra electricity that you have on the grid, and you're basically taking that hydrogen fuel to store for future use. So you can use this hydrogen fuel for your cars, you can put it back in your natural gas grid, or you can just use it in future opportunities as well. So this is a way that we can develop a fuel cleanly and also utilize excess electrical energy that otherwise would be wasted. So yeah, those are some of the big ideas that we're working on here at Enbridge. The biggest consumers here in Ontario are still your residential houses. You have individual users like processes and manufacturing that are using a ton for heating facilities. Like the biggest users that you'll see is like steel manufacturing, glass manufacturing, petrochemicals, etc. I mean, even your large kitchens. Like if you're thinking about industrial food management, like a lot of natural gas has to be used to cook our food. But in terms of like things that we can do on a very low level, uh, there's really three big opportunities. The first one is don't use natural gas when you don't need it. Like it can be as simple as reducing your internal temperature when you're outside of the house. Like if we weren't all stuck at home, very simply things like getting a Nest or an Ecobee thermostat to reduce your set point when you're outside of the house and not using it. That's a really good way to reduce. When you're using your mechanical equipment, or you might be upgrading it, make sure you pick the highest efficiency opportunity. And the third opportunity is heat recovery. So if you find that there's opportunities to like if you're say electrical equipment, or like this is more for industrial or commercial settings, but say for instance if your facility is using electricity and waste heat is being generated off of your mechanical equipment, finding ways to take that and reuse it in different opportunities also is a pretty big opportunity. We do have insulation programs. We also have um, basically if you're going to do a construction project in your house, we do provide reimbursements to have people walk through your building and find individual energy saving opportunities. Every building is unique, and the energy saving opportunities that you have within your building will be dictated by what construction you have, how you're running your building, etc. So Enbridge can or has incentive programs where we can, like, specifically for residential, like um, if you are planning to do a home renovation, call up the demand side management or the residential demand side management team at Enbridge. We can arrange walkthroughs and also provide monetary incentives for your building upgrades, like your insulation and your brand new, or actually, I don't think we, I'm not sure if we do the furnaces anymore, but basically your high efficiency measures can receive monetary reimbursements. I mean, prior to COVID, it would be like a lot of site visits, working with customers to garner new opportunities. Um, I'd be working with municipalities to look at their capital plans for some of the buildings that they intend on doing some capital retrofits on. And then when we see where they're planning to invest their money, it would be looking at building business cases for high efficiency opportunities rather than swapping out like for like. When it comes to like new construction is a big opportunity, but the majority of the projects going on these days are going to be looking at your existing buildings and trying to figure out how to make those existing buildings better, for instance. Um, so the every it's pretty easy to fall into a routine, and it's pretty easy to just say, okay, well, whatever we had before was good. But my job is really to help municipalities think about how to take it one step further and find a better solution. And so that would be like, if you want to go high efficiency, let's talk about how to build a business case, which for the savings you'll get in the long term um, by just putting a little bit of capital investment up front, or the opportunities if we put in like an energy recovery ventilator or a heat recovery ventilator, or if you have a building automation system, how can we make sure that we program in setback times and reduce airflow during evenings and weekends when people aren't using that. So those are the kind of the projects I deal with most frequently. um, Lately, given that municipalities are declaring climate emergency, and this is a big change that we're seeing across Ontario. It's been also trying to help Enbridge organize itself to think about how we want to help these municipalities in the future. Like, municipalities are customers that are seeing the most change, and Enbridge as an organization realizes that we have to grow as well. So working with the municipalities is a good avenue to help inform our strategy in the future. The communications and the language around these declarations is starting to come up. We're starting to see some municipalities um, look into certain buildings and see how you put them into net zero, also inclusive of the study that you're doing there at Enerlife. So those kinds of communications and those studies are starting to show up. Um, it takes Government has the opportunity to do very meaningful changes, but with a lot of industries that are working on very meaningful things, change is glacial. Um, so the intention is there, the language is there, the policy objectives are there. The change is a bit slow. The change is a bit slow moving, but there's more willingness to do it in the past. There's a push towards electrification. There's a lot of like it's interesting too because it's like there are municipalities out there that are actually looking towards just dephasing natural gas in entirety and working exclusively with electricity. We haven't those kind of communications are out there. We haven't actually really seen it too much into fruition here in Ontario yet, though. I mean, it is possible. There's a like those are that is messaging that's out there quite a lot, and yeah, it's definitely fair. It is a pathway to net zero, but I would challenge that and say it's not necessarily the only pathway. The like I kind of look at natural gas as like if your opportunities for energy um, or your selection for energy usage was kind of like picking dessert at a buffet table. Natural gas is like the equivalent to vanilla ice cream. Um, it's not the worst, it's not the best. It is the most reliable and probably one of the most readily available. So natural, like obviously with natural gas, you could definitely do worse. You could definitely do better, but it's hard to beat it in terms of the price and reliability. Um, so in terms of say natural gas consumption, buildings that I know of that are look like at a commercial level, not necessarily the residential level, but the commercial level, do want to keep natural gas because of its reliability element. And the other problem with that, like the other challenge that we can't ignore with climate emergency is here in Ontario, our big risk really is snowstorms and floods. So having a natural gas line as a reliable way for especially vulnerable housing is quite impactful. Also, knowing there that I'd also argue that it depends on how you use your natural gas as well. Um, because like the other reality is that when it comes to your electrical grid, unfortunately, Ontario is beginning to dephase a bunch of its is beginning to dephase a bunch of its nuclear. And unfortunately, with the way that things are trending, Ontario's electrical consumption is actually getting dirtier as is. So when you're using electricity and you're using natural gas from electricity, you're only garnering about 43% efficiency. Whereas when you can use it on the spot, you can garner much more efficiency because you can have the opportunity of using both the power and the thermal load. Whereas if you burn it right at like the plants, you only get the power load. Um, so with natural gas, there are opportunities to use it pretty efficiently. Like for example, natural gas heat pumps that whereas their efficiency is quite a bit higher. You will have a carbon footprint, definitely, but it depends on if you're offsetting it with distributed natural gas. Sorry, with distributed energy resources like on-site solar, solar thermal. The other part that is also worth noting is if you do exclusively electricity, it will be more expensive. But I wouldn't rule out opportunities like renewable natural gas, which is also a clean way of doing this because this is harvesting natural gas from waste management facilities. So that is another pathway to net zero. Um, so it's it is harder. But in terms of a quick severing of natural gas, yeah, it's possible, but there's still ways to still partner with Enbridge using either renewable natural gas or really reducing the natural gas consumption you're building, but still keeping a line for emergency management to still keep it in your mix. There's definitely opportunities out there, and hydrogen is a pretty big one. What you're describing there is blue hydrogen, which blue hydrogen is basically taking hydrogen from your natural gas, like your existing natural gas, and then sequestering the carbon dioxide. Whereas renewable hydrogen, what we were talking about, the power to gas, is really more the focus that we have here as at Enbridge as the utility. So just to clarify too, I personally only represent Enbridge Gas Distribution, which is the Ontario-based utility, and then Enbridge Inc. is the pipeline company that's headquartered out in Alberta. So it is possible. Unfortunately I haven't seen our groups work on blue hydrogen yet. The focus right now is power to gas, which is taking advantage of the excess of renewable energy that we have here in Ontario and converting it into renewable hydrogen to use either for fleet management, energy storage, or you can also take that hydrogen and pump it back into the natural gas pipelines that we use every day. Like basically the linchpin in these projects, whether you're a waste, like physical waste management facility or you're doing water waste management, is having an anaerobic digester. And since this is a physical waste opportunity, and municipalities really will need to figure out how to get rid of this stuff in the most efficient way possible, it is a growing opportunity for basically all facilities that have anaerobic digesters across Ontario, because it's waste that you need to get rid of. Policies are becoming more stringent, so if you can use this to make your energy generation cleaner, why wouldn't you? For natural gas consumption, there's like the Enbridge website would be a good place to start. In terms of I'm going to have a little bit of a plug for one of the organizations I worked for before this. Prior to coming to Enbridge, I was working at a nonprofit downtown called Mars Discovery District, where their mandate was to help support clean technology companies, startup clean technology companies. And so I would say Mars has some pretty good resources on some upcoming startups that are doing really interesting things around the space. Like, for example, going back to power to gas. Um, the power to gas project that we have is a partnership between the IESO, so the electrical body overseeing those bodies, and the technology itself is owned by a Canadian-based or an Ontario-based startup called Hydrogenics. So startups like that are really interesting to see what's going on around Ontario and the rest of Canada. Enbridge's website also has resources on renewable natural gas as well. Um, I guess this kind of starts like I'm from Calgary, and you have a really cool you have a really interesting juxtaposition in Calgary where you're around by some of the most immaculate nature in Canada, but you also realize that everything sustaining all this is oil and gas. Like oil and gas is keeping a lot of this afloat. Um, in a way, we Canada does need to diversify its and like I'm saying this as my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of Enbridge. Just to make that 100% clear. Um, I do think Canada needs to diversify its economy. I do think we need to find better ways of generating our electricity and all of our energy for that matter. Um, but at the end of the day, you still have a lot of people who rely on this, and we need to figure out a way to move this over to a better direction. Um, I started. I've jumped around a little bit more than I would have liked. Like initially, I started out in building science at the University of Toronto because I thought, okay, well, green buildings is just the best way to do this, and I still do think that green buildings is a really really big part in the sustainability strategy. I did my master's in mechanical engineering where I focused on smart cities. So there's a lot of jargon around smart cities, and I'll be honest, I got a little bit jaded with the idea of smart cities because although we do need monitoring to move forward on these kind of things, the problem I have with this idea of smart cities is the fact that most of our sustainability solutions are going to be hardware solutions. We have to generate our energy cleaner. We have to figure out ways to use less energy. We have to we have to figure out better bike lanes, better ways to drive, better ways that we can just consume less. And yeah, you know what? To put this into comparison, let's just say when you're working out, is it your Fitbit giving you data that's really making a difference, or is it really you and your initiative to physically put in that difference? And that's kind of the problem I had with smart cities. After that, I graduated. I worked a few jobs coming out of university because when I graduated, there just were not a lot of sustainability jobs. And then eventually I found myself back in the sustainability side by getting a job with Mars Discovery District, helping to support Canada's entrepreneurs, working on the clean technology side. Then from there, I got picked up by one of those startups called CarbonCure, where we did carbon sequestration into concrete materials. This is relevant because the concrete industry more specifically the cement industry, cement being concrete's binding agent. So if concrete was bread, cement would be flour. Cement is actually worth about 7% of the global emissions. So basically what we were doing at CarbonCure is we were taking waste CO2 and sequestering it into concrete materials. And concrete materials is actually one of the most abundant, it is the most abundant man-made material in the world aside from drinking water. That was out in Halifax. And yeah, I came back to Toronto because my partner is doing his PhD here, and long distance sucks. Like there's no way to put it around. So I came to Enbridge and thought that this is it's hard. It is going to be a really significant challenge to get oil and gas companies to move to a low carbon strategy. It's not something that's moving fast enough, but it's not going to move any faster unless people actually start working on it. And so I thought that this is an opportunity where I thought I could make the most difference given the resources that I have today. I did have a little bit of a stint where coming out of university, I worked in non-sustainability roles. I just said, okay, well, um, I actually worked for Bell Canada for a few years because there was a graduate rotational program. I didn't want to pay for an MBA because they're really expensive, but with Bell and like say for instance, if you really don't know what you're doing with your career, rotational programs where they take you on for about 2 years and you work between 3 to 5 jobs within the span of 2 years gives you interesting exposure to like marketing, sales, operations, and I did that for a few years, and I learned that environment really matters. Like say for instance, having people that you like working with and stuff like ideally ongoing challenges, as cliche as it sounds, like having new challenges to work on all the time is important. But I just never really felt settled. So I decided to give it another whirl just because I didn't get, I guess that's one of the things, the takeaways to anybody participating on this call right now is I think we desperately want to believe the job that we have right out of university is going to be somewhere we stay for a really long time. But unfortunately, with the way that the market has gone, it's not really the case. So if you're going to take a job because you have to pay your bills right now, but you're still deeply passionate about sustainability or something like that, still make the effort to try going at another time. Like it's just because like it doesn't work out initially doesn't mean that it's not going to work out in the future. And addressing like the question you said about staying motivated, um, no, I think that's kind of part of the problem. Is that we have this perception that just because you have a sustainability job means that you're going to be happy in your role all the time. At the end of the day, this is a job, and there are days that I do wonder why I'm even working on this. But that actually has been consistent with everything I've done. Like, say, in university, I think that we've all had moments of vulnerability where we're thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this. Why maybe I should quit this. Or if you're into competitive sports, like actually, my first real job was a carded athlete with speed skating Canada. I loved it. I just also really hated waking up and the politics of it as well. It's just the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love can be apathy. Um, so I guess my message with that is I do get discouraged, and it's kind of comes back to the fact that it's when you kind of look at what you're doing and if you believe it's important, the fact that you're discouraged, um, like the fact that what you're doing you believe is important does help motivate me even when things are not going that great. Um, and I also, when I really need inspiration, I find myself also turning to very imperfect heroes. And although social media probably overexposes people a lot, it's also really interesting to know that the people that we should look up to are not perfect. They're very human as well. Like a recent public star right now would be Jacinda Ardern, who is my complete hero right now. She is the Prime Minister of New Zealand and has managed to basically get the country on track to eradicate coronavirus. My favorite things about her is that she's very good at saying when she doesn't know the information. She's very good at showing empathy because climate change is a human problem. Climate change is not just about the fact that I would really like hiking to be available all the time. It's about the fact that if we don't do this, it's going to create more floods, more climate refugees. It's a bigger human problem. Um, so whoever your heroes are, I would encourage you to also be gentle about looking at their faults, because I think it's also easier to accept your own. The first thing is, back in university, you're really trying hard to find a job in something sustainability related. And I have, unfortunately, maybe a little bit cynical, but basically two parts of advice about that. Um, the first one is, please don't sacrifice your hobbies. Your hobbies are something that really do make your, like, hobbies being things that you authentically care for, things that just make you happy for the sake of being happy, and just basically external interest, because it's really tempting to look at a job posting or an industry and say, okay, I just want to be everything that they ask. When the reality is, what an employer wants is for you to be competent, for you to do some sort of job. Um, and so the thing is, you can change yourself to be everything the employer wants, but to really excel, you have to be able to bring the things that nobody else can bring, the parts of your identity that give you unique perspectives, unique interests. Um, Really just things that make you even tolerable to sit around a water cooler with. So I kind of think back to when I've been job hunting and spending all day waiting for those job boards to refresh and just trying to find other people to talk to. I'd say try to manage your time, but also don't give up on certain parts of your identity, whether that's anything that's sustainability related or really beyond. And then the second part about it too, the next thing I would also tell myself back then is, the sustainability roles that I've been part of. Actually, basically none of the jobs that I've worked throughout my career existed when I was coming out of high school. Sustainability is not necessarily a job. Sustainability is a theme. It's an envelope of a lot of different themes working together. Um, and the sustainability problems that I'm working on today are not going to be the sustainability problems that you will work on when you're at my stage in your career. At least I really, really hope you're working on different problems, because basically every step that we move forward are probably going to generate a bunch of others. Sorry, guys. Um, but the point in with what I'm trying to make with that is, when you are working with sustainability solutions, it's you have to take some sort of core competency and apply it to sustainability. Like, for example, um, if you're looking at Google, like Google has some really interesting technology. Like Google's probably one of the few software solutions I can think of. But in terms of taking NASA data and visualizing where you can harvest the best solar gains, that's a data science background applied to a sustainability solution. Green buildings is taking building science, so looking at your moisture, your heat loss, and your mechanical systems, and applying it in a green kind of way. If you're looking at carbon sequestration plays, like I was looking at my previous job, that is a chemistry degree, taking it to sustainability. So what I'm trying to say with that is, I wouldn't get too hard, like bogged down with the idea of sustainability. I would really double down on some sort of core competency and figuring out how you can apply that to sustainability, because those opportunities are only going to emerge with more abundance in the future.